My name is Clara Whitmore, and the day my billionaire grandfather's will was read, my family made sure everyone in the room knew exactly how little they thought of me. They didn't whisper it either. They said it loud enough for the entire room to hear. My cousin Amanda leaned toward the lawyer and laughed. "Don't worry about Clara," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "She's just the poor granddaughter." A few of my relatives chuckled. My Uncle Victor even smiled like the comment was harmless. But I stayed quiet because I had learned something important about my family a long time ago. They always spoke the loudest when they thought they had already won. And that morning, they believed they had. The law office was on the 38th floor of a glass tower overlooking downtown. The conference room was massive. Long black table, floor-to-ceiling windows. My entire family had arrived early. My Uncle Victor wore a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. My Aunt Caroline was already flipping through real estate listings on her tablet. My cousin Amanda had started talking about which of grandfather's yachts she wanted. Because my grandfather, Arthur Whitmore, hadn't just been rich. He had been one of the wealthiest private businessmen in the country. His empire included shipping ports, cargo airlines, energy logistics, and tech infrastructure. And when the estate auditors finished their valuation, the number was staggering: $100 billion. Everyone in that room believed they were about to inherit a portion of it, except me. I sat quietly in the last chair near the corner, wearing a simple black dress. My entire bank account had just over $300. I worked as a research assistant for a marine conservation nonprofit. Compared to the rest of my relatives, I might as well have been invisible. And most of the time, that's exactly how they treated me. But before I tell you what happened when the lawyer opened the final envelope, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment your city below. I read every comment. Now let me explain why my billionaire grandfather trusted the one person nobody expected. Growing up, my grandfather was more like a legend than a normal family member. He lived in a massive estate overlooking the ocean. Most of my relatives visited him only when there were holidays or business events. My Uncle Victor constantly tried to impress him with financial reports. My Aunt Caroline bragged about her MBA and corporate job. My Aunt Amanda talked endlessly about luxury properties and investments. But when I visited my grandfather, we never talked about money. We talked about the ocean. When I was 14, he once took me out on one of his cargo ships. We stood on the deck, watching the sunset disappear into the horizon. He asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up. "I want to protect the ocean," I told him. Most people in my family would have laughed at that, but my grandfather didn't. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. "You're the only one in this family thinking about the future," he said. At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. Years later, I did. When my grandfather passed away, the entire Whitmore family gathered for the will reading. Everyone looked confident. My Uncle Victor leaned back in his chair like he already owned the room. My cousin Amanda whispered to her boyfriend about private islands. Even the lawyer seemed prepared for an argument, because wealth that large rarely transfers peacefully. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and began reading. First came the charitable donations, billions allocated to universities, hospitals, and environmental foundations. Then came the luxury properties. Several estates went to various relatives. Art collections, aircraft, corporate shares. Each asset was carefully listed. My relatives nodded as their names appeared beside different assets, but the largest portion remained unopened. Finally, the lawyer reached the final section. He paused. Then he pulled out a sealed envelope. This section includes a recorded message from Mr. Arthur Whitmore. The lights dimmed. A large screen behind the table flickered on. My grandfather appeared, sitting behind his desk. Older than I remembered, but his eyes were still sharp. "If you're watching this," he said calmly, "then my family is probably arguing." A few people shifted in their chairs. He continued, "For years, many of you believed my wealth was something to compete for. You believed the fortune would reward loyalty." He paused. "But wealth is not a reward. It is responsibility." Then he said something that made the entire room turn toward me. "The only person in this room who never asked me for money is Clara." My cousin Amanda rolled her eyes, but the video continued. When Clara visited me, she didn't ask about yachts. She didn't ask about investments. She asked how our shipping routes affect the ocean. She asked how global trade changes marine ecosystems. My grandfather leaned slightly closer to the camera, and she asked a question none of you ever asked. What responsibility does wealth carry? The room had become completely silent. So I made a decision, he said. My controlling estate will go to the only person in this family who understands that money should build the future, not feed greed. The video ended. The lawyer folded his hands calmly. The controlling estate will transfer to Clara Whitmore. For a moment, nobody moved. Then my Uncle Victor slammed his hand on the table. This is fraud. My cousin Amanda stood up. This is ridiculous. But the lawyer calmly pushed a thick folder toward me. The transfer documents were finalized 6 months before Mr. Whitmore's death. The decision cannot be contested. That was the moment everything changed, because suddenly my family stopped seeing me as invisible. Now I was something else entirely, an obstacle. Over the next few weeks, my phone exploded with messages. My Aunt Caroline wanted to reconnect. My cousin Amanda suggested business meetings. My Uncle Victor demanded to review corporate governance. But the real confrontation happened 1 month later, when my Uncle Victor arrived at my apartment with 2 lawyers. You can't manage a $100 billion empire alone, he said. We need to run the companies. He slid a contract across the table. It transferred executive control to him. I looked at the document carefully. Then I remembered something my grandfather once told me while we were standing on that cargo ship. He said, money doesn't create character, it reveals it. So I closed the folder and pushed it back to him. No. The room went silent. You're making the biggest mistake of your life, he said. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Because inheriting wealth doesn't just change your life. It reveals the truth about everyone around you. And sometimes the people who call you the poor granddaughter are the same people who panic the moment they realize you're the one holding the future. 6 months later, the Whitmore Foundation launched the largest ocean restoration project in history. Billions invested into protecting marine ecosystems and rebuilding coral reefs. Reporters asked me why I chose that path. I simply repeated the words my grandfather once told me. Wealth isn't a reward, it's a responsibility. And that's when I realized something important. My grandfather didn't leave me his fortune because I was the smartest person in the room. He left it to me because I was the only one who never believed it belonged to me. So tell me honestly, if someone called you the poor granddaughter and then the lawyer gave you everything, what would you do next?